I feel like anyone who's interested in near-death experiences, spiritual experiences, knowing about Swedenborg will add something to what you're doing. And then started to have these spiritually transformative experiences. And the thing that's unique about him is how long they lasted. He began to have them daily and at will for 30 years at the end of his life, and how comprehensively he documented them. One feature of the spiritual world is that what's inside becomes visible there. So here, we look how we look, whatever. Thanks, mom and dad. This is how I'm going to look, or how I ate, or whatever. But there, it's like what you love and what you believe kind of shows up in your face. So some people he knew who had been, nothing to write home about in the afterlife because of the love that's in them. They're this glowing and beautiful, and there's like rivers and hills and mountains and animals that are there, but they're like the volume's turned up. Everything is more alive. Everything is more beautiful.
This is Beyond with Heather Tesch, where we examine near-death experiences and life itself, hopefully making this life a little better. Hello to everybody watching, and welcome to my guest, Curtis Childs. Hello, Curtis.
Thanks for having me on. This is so fun to get to talk to you.
It is wonderful to talk to you. We briefly met a few times because you've been a presenter at the IANS conference, and I just came up and said hello after your presentations. But I've never really had a chance to just sit down and chat with you, so I'm so excited about this. And we talk about near-death experiences on this channel, and also spiritually transformative experiences. And you study and you teach about a person called Emanuel Swedenborg, someone I had never heard of until you mentioned him at the IANS conference. And so I want to get into what he saw because he's traveled to the afterlife. I want to get real descriptive on everything he saw and experienced. But first, who is this guy?
Yeah, what I hope I can do is anybody who's interested in near-death experiences or spiritual experiences, most people haven't heard of Swedenborg, but he's such an add-on to whatever you have going on, and actually is at the root of a lot of the modern NDE culture. So in the first book, Raymond Moody's Life After Life, where the term near-death experience was coined, when he first started interviewing people, many of your viewers will be familiar, but he found this phenomenon where people in a hospital in Texas and people in a hospital in Croatia are reporting the same kind of experiences with a tunnel. He had this section of historical parallels where if people right now are having these experiences all over the place, must be that it didn't just start in 1980. Like what about back in the past? And so he had a section on when has this happened before? And it was just like a few examples. It was the Tibetan Book of the Dead, the Bible, one other I forget, and then Emanuel Swedenborg. So right then he was saying, look, this is the similarities to what Swedenborg recounted back in the 1750s and what's happening today are uncanny. So he did that. Also, Kenneth Ring, who co-founded IANS, which is the conference you were just talking about, he had a quote that was at the intro to a book about Swedenborg that said, people who have had a near-death experience have peeked through the door into the afterlife, but Swedenborg explored the whole house. So I think it's just a cool resource. The short story is Swedenborg was an incredibly smart, successful polymath, Renaissance man. Was born in 1688, died 1772. He was into everything. He was published and studied the fields of anatomy and botany and chemistry. He was part of his career for a lot of it was he was a mining engineer. He designed apparatuses to draw ore out of the earth and help the Swedish government. He designed military technology for them. He was a member of the government, so he's in the Swedish House of Nobles. He founded the modern scientific branch of crystallography. There was recently a Duke University researcher who said like Swedenborg's research on the brain was 200 years ahead of his time. So he was really good at everything and was doing great and had this good career that he was on, and then started to have these spiritually transformative experiences. And the thing that's unique about him is how long they lasted. He began to have them daily and at will for 30 years at the end of his life, and how comprehensively he documented them. Like every day he was talking about everything he saw, and not in very flowery language where I'm trying to convince. It's just, here's the facts, here's the nuts and bolts of how this works. So to me, I love near death experiences, have read a lot of them. Swedenborg gives me the framework where I can understand why the things that happen in near death experiences happen. Like, what are the sort of spiritual physics that underlie it? And to me, it just ties together all facets of life, kind of gives you a real sense of how the spiritual and the physical worlds interact. So this is why I bothered to, on our channel, Off the Left Eye, I have like 1,600 videos that are just exploring. He wrote over 30 volumes of this is what goes on in life after death. This is the mind and the body and how it all works. So I feel like anyone who's interested in near-death experiences, spiritual experiences, knowing about Swedenborg will add something to what you're doing.
So that is about him. Then you said he started having these dreams. Continue from there. What kinds of things did he see? Did it progress to other things?
Yeah. So the cool thing about Swedenborg is you can see in real time a spiritual awakening happen. Because the period in which he went from being just a normal person who had maybe had one or two semi-spiritual experiences, but mostly was just like a secular, regular person, to being someone who had, as he described it, his spiritual eyes opened and just could daily interact with the spirit world. He was keeping a journal of it while that happened. And you can see him kind of learn about all this stuff. So it's published now, as he didn't publish it, but people after his death found it and published it. It's called Swedenborg's Journal of Dreams. And it's also notable that it's one of the earliest records of somebody trying to psychoanalyze their own dreams. So he would dream about, for example, he dreamed about a black dog. In a couple of his dreams, he had a black dog that was trying to attack him or bite him. And he came to believe that this was a symbol of his own pride. Because as I mentioned, he was really smart and really successful. And part of a spiritual awakening is having to confront the fact that you think you're so much better than everyone else, but you're not. That we're all beings worthy of love and honor and esteem. So he had to wrestle with that a lot. But you can see it started out as dreams, but then it progressed into what he would call preternatural sleep, which is, preternatural just means beyond normal. So something was different about this. I mean, this was all written in Swedish, but that's how it's been translated. But then he started to have what he called experiences in a state of full wakefulness. And he would even have, then he recounts the first time that what he calls a spirit, which means a person in the afterlife, talked to him, addressed him directly. And that was unnerving to him, but also exciting. And then he reported a vision of God that was really moving to him and kind of set him on this path. And then from then on, he started to recount his journeys, which became very vivid and descriptive. I mean, he talked about going into the afterlife and looking around and seeing landscapes that you'd sort of recognize it and you sort of wouldn't. That there's things like you hear in many modern near-death experiences, there's like rivers and hills and mountains and animals that are there, but they're like the volume's turned up. Everything is more alive. Everything is more beautiful. But he also talked to the people that were there. So he got to visit communities. He talked about there's people, everybody who was living here is there, and and it's the same people are still them, although they've continued to grow and evolve and change. But he was able to go and meet people he had known in his life and see them and see how they looked, because you kind of change how you look changes there, because one feature of the spiritual world is that what's inside becomes visible there. So here, we look how we look, whatever. Thanks, mom and dad. This is how I'm going to look, or how I ate, or whatever. But there, it's like what you love and what you believe kind of shows up in your face. So some people he knew, who had been, nothing to write home about in the afterlife, because of the love that's in them. They're this glowing and beautiful, and so. To him, it was this amazing convergence of the familiar and the amazing together. So there's this whole new world he started to explore.
You're saying what so many other near-death experiencers are saying is it's just so much more vibrant over there. And when I went to your channel, one of the things that you were talking about in one of your videos was the atmosphere and some of the things he saw. And I found that really fascinating. What is the atmosphere like?
Yeah. So the spirit, broadly speaking, there's the physical world and then the spiritual world, according to Swedenborg's cosmology. And you experience this right now because you have a physical body and then you have your consciousness, which he says is spiritual. So there's the part of you that's like conscious right now hearing this. It's doing it through the mechanism of your physical body, but the actual conscious part of you is spiritual. So there's these two worlds. You inhabit both of them right now, the physical and the spiritual world. The physical world runs on physical laws. So gravity. Now, the only reason why I stay stuck down here is because of gravity. You and I could not be having this conversation if all the parts in this microphone were not exactly how they needed to be, and however the internet works. So the physical stuff dictates what goes on here physically. Spiritual world, you could call it the consciousness world. So there, physically, it doesn't. How I feel doesn't really change things around me. I can be feeling a lot of love. I can be feeling a lot of negativity. The walls stay the same. In the spiritual world, what's inside you is what shapes what's going on around you. So a community of people who people in the afterlife naturally, instead of gravity pulling things together, it's love that pulls things together. So people who love the same kind of things sort of get, you could call it, are pulled together by that love, and they form different communities. There's all different kinds of people, and they have different kinds of love. But the things that are in the hearts and minds of those people actually set the environment around them. So even the atmospheres, he talked about it as being a lot of different atmospheres. Like I guess now you could talk about the different layers in the atmosphere of Earth, but there it seems like there's sort of lots of different pockets of it. That it depends on what's in the hearts and minds of people. So he visited, there's this one place he called the Rainbow Heaven, where because of the kind of, he uses the term angels, but by that he just means people who are now in the afterlife, who have opened themselves up to the love that's there. The angels that are there, because of what they love, he says that I don't even really know how to picture it, but the whole atmosphere seems to be made up of little rainbows. So I guess if you ever put on those rainbow glasses, like when you're a kid, that make it so any light source you look at has like rainbow rays going out from it. Maybe it's like that, but everything is made up of, he talked about little microscopic rainbows. And so everything in there sparkles with a certain kind of light. He talked about sort of the quality of the nature of the light changing. If you're in a community that's more truth focused, he says there's like truth and love are the main things that are important there. And you can have varying levels of each. If you're more truth focused, the light is more white and more bright. If you're love focused, it's more golden hour. They'll call it more reddish. And so that there's atmospheres of each kind there. He talked about certain atmospheres that seem to be composed of little flowers, which again, I don't know exactly what that would be. And some of these atmospheres especially appear around children who have maybe died young and come into the afterlife, but there's the innocence that's in them, and the people that are taking care of them, that kind of exudes this atmosphere. So you can tell what kind of people live somewhere by looking at the sky. What's the sky like around them? Because it's their own hearts and minds that kind of propel that. So yes, the atmospheres is he talked about a emerald, different kinds of rainbows, like a emerald green rainbow in one place. Also, things that are in people's hearts and minds will get portrayed in the sky. So if there's a community that's really like a really lofty, really wise, really evolved community of people, and they're talking about something that maybe even you and I on a lower level can't understand, we'll see these clouds doing these formations and colors. And from that, we can kind of pick out, this is the sort of stuff that they're talking about. So there was different sorts of rainbows appear in the sky, brighter or darker kinds of clouds. It's like you can look around and you can, if you know how to read it, everything is telling you about the nature of everything. So it's a pretty cool setup, it seems like.
I think I'll be with the cat lady group or the animal lovers group.
Yeah.
So maybe some flying cats around.
That's, well, you know, like, and animals too, like there's a connection like with the things in your heart and different kinds of animals. So even like the types of animals that are, he said, animals and birds and plants that are around a particular community, it has to do with the harmony in the heart. So yeah, absolutely. You could have, it would just be like cat love. And then there's something about the whole thing that lines up with that.
So, do animals from Earth then end up there?
I don't know. I hope so. He doesn't really go into detail about that. I hope so, man. Oh yeah, I had my dog died a little over a year ago from now, and I still feel like, oh, he's got to be there. 18th century people didn't really think about pets as much in the same way. So what this is what I get that question all the time from people, but he just like didn't bother to address it, which is I think a time period thing. But I would hope that everybody's there. But either there's certainly he talks about animals being all there. He just doesn't talk about where exactly they come from.
A lot of near-death experiencers do say that our animals will be there, so I think your dog is going to be there.
I hope so. Rainbow Bridge, they call it, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
You said he spoke to people or what he calls angels, the spirits of people. What kind of conversations did he have?
The ones that he recounts are have to be heavily translated because for two reasons. One, he wrote it in Latin. That was sort of like the learned language of the day. But also, he says that you think and speak differently in the afterlife than you do here. That there's like a universal language there. You don't speak the same languages on Earth, but you know it right when you get there because the way he describes it is, so let's say there's an English word for water and there's a French word for water and there's all these different languages, but there's the concept behind, which is just water itself. The language in the spiritual world is directly the concepts. So you immediately know somehow that he gets there, he never has to learn the language or anything. It's like it's speaking right to him. So there's a different language, but also they just think they think a little differently than we do. I think this is maybe part of why people who have had a near-death experience sometimes have a little difficulty integrating back into this world, because in this world, we're generally pretty materialistic and shallow compared to what's going on there. So the sorts of conversations that Swedenborg would have with these angel people that he would get back and try to put it as best he could into words usually are about things like, what is the actual nature of love? How do you best live a loving life? What's the nature of the divine? What are the qualities that those sorts of things? It's the interest is in particularly in how do you live well? How do you care for people? How do you be useful? Being useful, that was something he really discovered is important in the afterlife. That to him, so he talked about everything that's sort of all the love that's good in the afterlife. He called heaven. He says that the core of the happiness that you can have in heaven is the joy of being useful to someone else. So if you think about, I had this actually 2 nights ago. There was something I had to do for work, and I just had this feeling of like, I can do this, and this is going to help. And there was this excitement around it, and you're thinking about the impact you have, what you're doing matters. That feeling can grow immensely in heaven. It's actually what people in heaven are happy. Sure, it's like it's beautiful there, and there's not the same kind of, you don't have to deal with the same kind of, oh, my hip is bad like we have here. But the core of what makes people happy there is doing useful things for people. And he lists what they are. Some of it has to do with them helping us here on this earth. He talks about people who are welcoming new people into the afterlife and orienting them, and when they can do something that they know really helps people, that's what gets everyone out of bed in the morning. And he says there's so many varieties in what you can do there that even like the number of occupations that we have here on earth are relatively few. There's so much useful things to do there. And everybody has a very full and rich life. There's art, there's entertainment, there's socializing, but the center of it, like what it rotates around, is how am I contributing to the welfare of the human race, both in the spiritual world and in the physical world.
You just said that they do things for people on Earth. What kinds of things do they do?
Something that surprised Swedenborg is how connected we are now to the afterlife. He has a quote. I'm not going to be able to quote it directly, but it's something like, people think of spiritual things like a bird flying off in the sky. oh, that's something that's out there. But in reality, he said, it's like a beautiful bird of paradise that's so close to you that its feathers are brushing your face. It's right there. And he also makes the claim that we would absolutely not be able to survive for an instant without a connection to angels. So that even our life itself, our consciousness comes like out of the divine, almost like a supply chain through heaven and then into us individually. And so you always have at least two angels that you're connected to at all times. There can be other groups of angels around you, but basically the human being as he saw it has two main components, which is your will or what you love, and then your intellect or how you think and what you believe, which I mentioned before as being sort of the two grand things in heaven. So you have one angel who's like your mind angel with you, and one angel who's your heart angel. And what they try to do is, what they want to do is bend your purposes in a good direction, or make it so you try to influence you to have good goals in life, because the goals are what kind of make us who we are. And by that, I mean, I don't mean necessarily I've got a bulletin board and this year I want to make $20,000 more, but I mean, what am I trying to do in my life? Broadly speaking, is my life simply about enriching myself and rising above other people in eminence and importance? Is that what gives me the most joy? Is that it? Is that what's driving me? Or am I thinking about how can I be useful? How can I make myself into someone who's having a good impact on the world in whatever I'm doing, in the relationships in my family, if I've got a job, in the people I'm working with? Angels want you to kind of go in that direction. So they will try to, they don't push you around. They're very much want to respect your freedom and need to respect it, because being free is what it is to be a conscious being. You can't just force someone. And also, anyone who gets forced to do anything, it doesn't really become a part of them. So they have to do it in freedom, but they'll try to influence your thoughts and feelings. Like, people will talk about, oh, where did that thought come from? Or my guardian angel stopped me from doing this. They'll just try to, you can find them if you look in your feelings and your thoughts. When a good thought comes in or a good feeling comes in, there's some of heaven in that. So to Swedenborg, they're very real and tangible. The ways and there's all kinds of ways they can interact with you, but the main way day to day for us is they try to steer us toward what's good and true if we're willing to go that way.
And I guess the key then for us is to actually be open to hear that or feel that.
Yeah. I mean, I'm 40 now. 20 years ago, I wasn't so open to that. I was just much more wrapped up in whatever I was wrapped up in. But you go through life, and a part of it is life softens you up. You go through a bunch of things that are difficult, and that kind of tamps down your ego a bit and gets you open to, oh, actually, maybe I could use some help. Maybe I could use some guidance. Maybe the world doesn't revolve around me. And absolutely, I think I have a long way to go, but I definitely feel more interested in opening up to that and more willing. And I think life, he called it regeneration, which is this process of spiritual rebirth that is, it's just like you put it, it's a slow, continual opening up to the things that heaven is trying to offer you. And actually, that he talked about levels in heaven. He talked about 3 levels of heaven. And what they are is just, he says the human mind has 3 levels to it. And as the first level opens, you come into the first state of heaven. As the second level opens, you're in the second state. So I think opening is a great way to put it.
We're kind of running out of time in this segment, but I want to talk about coming up it sounds like a conversation with God. What happened there? I believe he also discusses hell, so we can talk about that and maybe
Yes.
touch on those levels as well. But let's go ahead, Curtis, and take that into part 2.
Can't wait.
Wasn't that interesting? And we cover more great topics in part 2. Take a look.
One of the ideas that was harmful that he was supposed to counteract is the idea that God is angry at you and condemns you and judges you. That he said that this is a total affront to the character of God, who is love itself. He traveled these places that he called heaven, and they're full of everything that's beautiful and good. And he traveled these places that are called hell. They're full of everything that's scary and gruesome. But everybody who's in those places chose to be there. Hell is not a place of punishment that's run by God. It's just like the natural extension of, I said before, in heaven, the surroundings, that everything, the atmosphere is a reflection of who you are inside. So it can be in hell.
Okay, that and a whole lot more. And you can always find links to part 1 or part 2 or release dates in the description. Just click that little word more that opens it up. That's where you're going to find it. You can also find links there to all of my episodes, and you can find links for Curtis. But let's talk about today and some of the things that you heard. Just really interesting to learn more about Swedenborg. Like I said, I hadn't heard about him until I saw Curtis at a conference sharing it. And he had some great insight, just sharing descriptions of heaven and the groups. Will some of you be joining me in the cat lady people or the cat lovers? That was really interesting. So many things. What stood out to you? What was your favorite thing that you heard? What did you learn? Share those kinds of things in the comments. I love connecting with you, hearing your thoughts, and I do try to get back to as many of you as I can. As you know, you can also just say you made it. Any comment, anything really helps this channel. And some of you are so great about doing that. So thank you for doing that week after week. I also appreciate all of your likes, for subscribing. And thank you so much to those of you that share this with a friend. And please keep doing that. I really am grateful for all of you. I'm just grateful too for you being here today. Thank you so much. I do hope you'll come back for part 2. It is going to be really interesting.
Thanks for joining me on Beyond with Heather Tesch. Please add comments and questions you'd like future guests to answer. Also, if you liked what you heard, please hit the thumbs up button and subscribe. That'll help keep this podcast going. You can also go to Beyond with Heather Tesch to look for more episodes.